The digital age of high technology, smart systems and AI is in full swing. But did anyone see this coming?
Good evening and welcome to this very special edition of Tomorrow's World.
30 years ago, the BBC programme Tomorrow's World got out its crystal ball and imagined what the world might look like this year. There were some accurate predictions.
Some resorted to hacking and electronic terrorism.
Scanning arm ID chip now.
But some were, well, let's just say, a bit less accurate.
At the moment, we still have control because we can switch the internet off.
The idea of switching the internet off, ridiculous.
From smart speakers and VR headsets to hologram surgery, cyberspace riots, and
The spray that resequences your sweat glands so even your perspiration comes up smelling of roses.
let's have a look at 7 ways a TV show predicted 2025.
What will the future be? That is a big question. By 2025, we can expect big changes.
In 1995, much was uncertain. But Tomorrow's World had little doubt that by 2025, the internet would be a very big deal.
Huge amounts of information travelled across the world in seconds. People were astounded.
My name's Vivienne Parry and I was a presenter on Tomorrow's World, and for the Tomorrow's World special we did on what life would be like in 2025.
This state-of-the-art whole-body scanner has a radically different approach.
Tomorrow's World was the very first programme on the BBC to have an email address. And people always used to think we were a bit odd in the BBC. But we were very alert to those problems that the internet might pose.
It was all just getting going.
I can work the internet.
And in the workplace, it was a new challenge for many.
It's as easy as pushing the send button.
Tomorrow's World predicted trouble ahead. Big trouble.
Massive amounts of money belonging to ordinary people had been redirected by computer terrorists. The response was widespread and terrifying.
That meant, said the programme makers, serious disorder.
Cyberspace riots.
Even today, governments around the world shudder at the memory of the cyberspace riots of 2005.
Others too worried about what the internet age might bring.
The internet is a bit like the ocean in which life first developed. Computer viruses are a form of life that can survive in this ocean and can reproduce themselves.
Well, we didn't see cyberspace riots, but
the prediction that hacking would become a problem, well, it's proven to be right, isn't it? Because hacking and cybersecurity, companies have lost billions of dollars. And in fact, now we've got to start thinking about, with AI involved, hacking and cybersecurity becomes a personal issue, not just for corporations. So yeah, they got that completely right. Apart from the riots, because the riots were completely wrong.
Traditional shopping seemed archaic in the face of its future.
We've gone from local corner shop to catalogue hypermarkets and now to this.
the show predicted the arrival of online shopping, with our food, clothes and almost everything else delivered straight to the door. Amazon boomed from bookseller to mega corporation.
Retailing was something we definitely got right. We really did foresee that people would want to do their shopping online. I don't think any of us, though, could have predicted just how huge it would be.
Banks too would change. How about withdrawing some money using a chip in your arm?
Welcome to Barland's Bank. Scanning arm ID chip now. How can I help you, Mrs. Morrow?
Well, will I ever see a human in a bank again?
I don't understand.
Well, there's a surprise. Try this. Withdraw 100 euro marks.
Command accepted. Enjoy your day.
We were excited by somebody at the time who had had a chip implanted in his arm and he could open doors with his chip. I mean, ridiculous. I mean, the whole thing was nonsense.
What they might not have guessed now, of course, is in banking we now have branchless banks, for example. We now have mobile phones that have your apps on, that have your banking. We now have chatbots and AI and even AI wealth advisors. We have a huge amount of technology inside the banking world, which maybe they wouldn't have guessed.
The programme makers were right about one thing. Keeping really big numbers of electric cars on the road would be a big challenge.
For years, tomorrow's world has been rather optimistically promising the arrival of the performance electric car. But the battery breakthrough needed to solve that woeful lack of power and distance just hasn't materialised, and no one wants a car that won't go far. They never made it into our hearts or onto our highways.
We now know that actually it's the infrastructure, it's the charging points, it's the volume manufacturing, it's the policy matter that determine when a technology actually comes to fruition.
But who would be at the wheel? Maybe nobody.
So how can we use these super intelligent motors? Well, cut out the middleman and let them drive themselves. Cars use sensors to keep a constant distance from each other, braking and accelerating in perfect harmony. Of course, you could always take a cab. Rather more intimidating than the little black number they're finally replacing. These are the latest taxis to hit the roads.
The hype around driverless cars is growing all the time. In 2024, Tesla unveiled the Cybercab, looking a little different to the 1995 prediction.
Driverless cars have got the ability to completely change the way we look at transportation and, perhaps more importantly, to sever the emotional link we have to cars. Imagine if your office can suddenly go into your car and you don't have to worry about driving. Imagine all the time you're going to save if you're not driving and you can multitask at the same time.
And what about high-speed travel? In the future, they foresaw shuttles boasting a 40-minute travel time from London to Bangalore.
We have special offers on at the moment. The shuttle to Bangalore leaves every half an hour and the journey only takes 40 minutes.
Reply, I'll think about it.
As it turns out, high-speed travel in the UK is stuck in the slow lane. HS2, the high-speed rail link between London and the West Midlands, is years away from completion. And the supersonic jet Concorde was actually retired in 2003. Some countries, including China, have high-speed rail for sure, but maybe their approach is the exception.
One of the reasons I believe that super fast transport hasn't taken off is fundamentally we might not need it. Got to remember the speed of digital communication. I don't need to get a supersonic jet to New York when I can simply do a Zoom with the very same people. The other thing, of course, is it costs so much money to do it. You have to pay for infrastructure. There's also government regulations, and maybe that's why it hasn't happened.
When it came to the human body, the programme foresaw huge progress in our understanding of DNA.
The complexities of the human genetic code were unravelled.
The Human Genome Project, the final draft appeared in 2000. I reported on it then for the BBC and said it was going to revolutionise medicine. I found myself in 2013 being approached by Genomics England to be part of the 100,000 Genomes Project, sequencing 100,000 people's genomes in the UK with undiagnosed disease or cancer. It was the first time it had ever been done. So there was a prediction from tomorrow's world, and I was part of delivering its future. It was extraordinary.
Feeling romantic? Well, genetics was predicted to have an impact here too.
For the genetically challenged, the process of rearing the perfect child starts with a hunt for the perfect spouse. And numerous agencies have sprung up to help would-be parents find the very best match for their own chromosomes.
Because you were born to be together.
There'd be a transformation of dating. Genetic dating promised the chromosomally perfect partner with the right products.
And how about this for gene therapy? The latest cosmetic asset for the congenitally vain. The spray that resequences your sweat glands so even your perspiration comes up smelling of roses.
The thing about genetic dating, though, which was ridiculous, is that genes are not your whole story.
But hang on. Looking further ahead than 2025, might dating change in other ways?
Whilst the show predicted a rise in what they call genetic dating, I actually see something else potentially happening, and that is the rise of dating with your artificial intelligence. And so you could almost create a kind of perfect boyfriend through AI or perfect girlfriend based on data and your feedback and emotional intelligence. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if people started to have emotional connections and maybe even relationships with these things, these artificial intelligences.
So will it be I take thee, ChatGPT?
We are, after all, freer of infection now than we have ever been. Systematic programs for eradicating viruses followed the example of smallpox back in the 1950s. Added to that list now are polio, measles, rubella and chickenpox.
The programme anticipated the eradication of infectious diseases through vaccination by 2015.
I think the really shocking thing when you look back at that programme was how we were predicting that we would see the end of infectious diseases like measles. And we absolutely should have seen the end of measles. But it's all those things that have happened since, anti-vaccine sentiments, not being able to get vaccines to the places that really need them most. Those are the things that shamefully have prevented those things happening.
But how would the new inoculations be delivered? How about this?
Some said it was too risky. Genetically engineered mosquitoes let loose in the tropics. But instead of spreading malaria, the hope was they'd inoculate against it. The gamble paid off, and after eradicating malaria, the benign bite came to Britain. Here, parents were encouraged to expose their children to the inoculating bite of the chickenpox midge.
So while chickenpox midges didn't quite play out as envisaged, the programme did foresee the controversial onset of genetically modified mosquitoes.
We made a film about genetically engineered mosquitoes, actually not part of this particular programme. The cameraman said to me, just move that box, Viv. So I moved it, and there wasn't actually a bottom to the box. And at that point, all these genetically modified mosquitoes all swarmed out. That was the first release of genetically modified organisms in the UK. Luckily, I think it was November, and they probably died before they hit the bottom of the road.
And there'd be more, many more biological breakthroughs. Top surgeons would no longer need to travel to patients. Instead, spatial gloves would allow them to operate remotely.
It's taken 20 years, but at last, surgeons can stay put and the patients come to them by hologram. Spatial gloves pinpoint the exact position of the surgeon's hands, and the coordinates are transmitted to robotic surgeons anywhere around the world.
And while that wasn't exactly right, we've certainly seen some big changes.
The programme predicts that there are going to be famous surgeons that will do these procedures and be followed from people all the way around the world. Well, that prediction's pretty much bang on.
The first surgery to be filmed in 360-degree virtual reality and streamed live online for anyone to watch anywhere in the world.
There are surgeons that do amazing work that are actually watched by hundreds of thousands of people at the same time from around the world. And so with virtual reality, but also with AI and robotics, they pretty much got that bang on. The rise of the super surgeon.
Walsall Industrial Estate has returned to being Cooper's Thicket, the latest and most dramatic example of industrial and agricultural land reclamation.
When it came to the environment, former industrial estates were predicted to be rewilded, with wildlife left to roam our once concrete jungles.
Just a few hundred yards down there, a family of brown bears have been released into Cooper's Thicket. Now, these are the first to roam freely in Britain since the Middle Ages, and they join the red squirrels, deer, wild boars, and more controversially, the wolves that have been re-established on private adventure parks around the country.
Afraid not, Monty, but
there has been a technological revolution in agriculture, and therefore we have things that they could never have imagined. So 5G is used in farming, data analysis is used in farming. All these things allow us to use less and less land and less chemicals every time we farm. And that's not even to talk about things like vertical farming. So I think the predictions in the programme were right, but weren't quite right to the extent. There really has been a revolution in agriculture.
And so lastly, to outer space. With Earth's resources dwindling, companies turned to mining on asteroids.
Its payload, estimated to be worth $20 billion on the open market, is the first haul of precious metals mined from an asteroid.
Mined from an asteroid? Well, that's a way off yet. But maybe tomorrow's world was onto something.
If you look at the space industries right now, it's one of the most booming sectors in the UK. You have people that are thinking about mining in space. You have people that are thinking about data centres in space, where you're getting energy from the sun, and you've taken away some of the global warming problems of data centres located on Earth. So I think if I had to predict for the future, space would be the next frontier.
Right from the start, mankind has been making a mess in space. Gloves, fragments from old satellites, all bowling along at around 10 kilometres a second.
Space junk was a thing then, and it's an even bigger thing now. So I think there's going to have to be a whole load of not only new technologies, but also the regulation to stop people just shoving stuff up into space.
So there we are, 7 predictions, some bang on, others, well, a bit ridiculous really. But let's be fair, no one could have imagined much of what's happened since 1995.
Our fault, if we had any fault, our fault was that we were over-optimistic and enthusiastic, but we really had a commitment to technology and to seeing how it could unfold actually for the better health and enjoyment of everyone. And that was a great thing to do.